Wriothesley is the first 5-star Cryo character coming to Genshin in a really long time, and he's the first Cryo catalyst ever. After managing to dodge the standard banner speculations, people have refocused their attention. Is he actually going to be good, or is he actually kind of mid? And while we can't say for sure until we actually test him, I believe that although his damage might not be top tier, he's going to be a surprisingly flexible character, which will make him worth considering and potentially worthwhile for a number of accounts. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Wriothesley is an on-field Cryo DPS character who normally uses his punching attacks similarly to Hazo to do his damage. He has somewhat middle-of-the-road multipliers, and this has caused him to be met with quite a bit of speculation and quite a bit of accusation that he's actually going to be mid. This is going to be a somewhat chill video. It's not going to be a full guide video because I'll be saving that for my actual analysis on day one. You can stay subscribed, and on day one, even before his banner is live, I will have a full guide where I've tested him and I'll give you the lowdown on all of his teams, what are the best teams to play. But I did want to speculate today based on what we know for now, what I'm looking for when I'm going in to test him, what I think his strengths are going to be, what I think his weaknesses are going to be, how I think his team building is going to look. Hopefully through looking at all that, you can parse together whether or not he's going to be worth it for your accounts. I'm going to focus a lot on this video on whether or not he is a good fit for you, because I think more than a character being powerful, although I am excited to test that, it's one of my favorite things, which is to test a character and see, are they powerful, are they strong, how do they stack up against each other? I find that really fun. But when you're actually looking to pull a character, when you're actually looking to invest in a character account, it's not really the most important thing that you need to take a look at. The most important thing is, do they synergize with your other units? I mean, obviously, do you like them in the first place? I can't help you with that, right? Only you can know if you actually love the character, if you actually really want to invest in this character. But I can help you figure out, do they synergize with your other characters? If you're kind of on the fence, will they actually work with your account, or will they maybe take too many supports that your other characters should be using? Do you not have those supports? Does he need those supports? How reliant is he on these? Do they need those weapons? Is he free to play friendly? Is he good for you? So we do know a lot so far, but I'll definitely be pointing out what we don't know yet. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is his general fighting style. So as we look at the live stream, I just pull it up here, we can see that he's a melee character. So you're obviously going to be fighting up close and in personal with, you're going to be a catalyst user. So you will always have cryo infusion with your normal attacks, which is really nice, especially for the overworld. It also does have some uses in the Abyss for cryo application, but especially for the overworld, that means if you run out of your boosted attacks, like if you run out of your main ways of dealing damage, you can still finish off enemies. It's kind of like Wanderer, where he obviously his elemental skill infusion is going to give him boosted damage. If you run out of boosted damage, you can always use your regular normal attacks to finish off especially weaker enemies. A lot in the overworld, you don't need your massive boosted damage for those. And also very similar to Wanderer, I know this is going to come up a lot, he boosts his normal attacks by using his elemental skill. So that's another pro for him for use in the overworld, because you don't actually need to have your burst on cooldown. He's not like a Sino character where you need to have your burst all the time. And it is good for the Abyss too. It makes him a lot more flexible with his rotations in the Abyss. And sometimes you may not you don't need to like use your burst just to finish off a certain enemy, because sometimes when you're at the end of the Abyss chamber, they've got enough HP to survive but not so much HP that you want to use your whole burst window, and then you have no energy going into the next Abyss. It's really nice to have a skill infusion rather than a burst infusion, because it can just help clean up those little enemies and help clean up and fix up your rotations if you didn't quite do things right, or if the enemies just the damage didn't quite line up. So I think that's a really good pro he's got going. His cons as well, if we look at sort of the multipliers, and if you've taken a look at the Genshin Scientist, who I get a lot of my information from, and also from Zajeff77. You should subscribe to both of those guys, by the way. They're fantastic. He made this great video on Wriothesley, sorry. And of course, Zajeff. It's looking like that his multipliers, well, they're not looking crazy. Like, they're not looking terrible by any means, but they're not looking absolutely crazy. And I think it's because for most characters, Genshin likes to have a bit of give and take. If they're gonna make a character flexible, they don't usually, there are exceptions of course, but they don't usually actually make them extremely strong. And usually if someone's extremely strong, they're not usually all that flexible with the teams that they can have, for example. There obviously are a lot of exceptions, you know, Yelan, Kazuha, but maybe not a lot of exceptions, right? Because Ayaka, very strong, but very inflexible. Ayato, very flexible, but maybe not quite as powerful. And I think that Wriothesley falls into this more Ayato tier, where he's not quite as powerful, but he is quite flexible, which is where I want to go into his teams, because when I said that he might be a pull worth considering for you, well, it depends on a couple things. Now, while I don't ever think he's worth it strictly for power, like if based on what I've seen anyways, we'll have to test him out, we'll have to see how strong he actually feels. But if you want like a cryo character, let's say you want to build a freeze team, and I think this is a relevant discussion because freeze really is one of the most fun reactions that you can actually have. I really, really like freeze. I like how it plays. I like it in the overworld. I like it in the abyss. Not all abysses. Some abysses it's not as good, especially recently. But right now, the only really good character we have for freeze is Ayaka. And we do have Ganyu, and she can be quite good for freeze, but most of the time she's not. And she's very inflexible with when her freeze teams work and when they don't. And she's even more restrictive than freeze itself. So Ayaka really is, if you want to build a great freeze team, she really is the only option. So a really, really cool thing is that Wriothesley, we've got Heizo as our stand-in, of course, since he fights similarly, is Wriothesley is going to be a pretty solid choice for freeze teams. Now, obviously, I've got a very expensive freeze team here, but there's also things you can do to make him more free-to-play friendly. So if we replace Kokomi with Xingqiu, if we replace Shenhe with Rosaria, and I really don't think you're going to be able to replace Kazuha on this team, but this already makes a pretty solid team. Now, there is some concern with this free-to-play team. It could be that Xingqiu is always the superior choice to Kokomi, because Xingqiu obviously does a lot more damage, and he has much better synergy with Wriothesley than with Ayaka, because he actually wants the normal attack. You're going to be fighting in melee range, so all of them are up close to you. So the ideal would be you group everyone up with Kazuha, swirl your cryo, get your Xingqiu on there. I'm not exactly sure of the order of the rotation, but you want to get your Xingqiu on there. You have your burst, your Rosaria burst there, and everyone's grouped up, everyone's taking damage, and then Wriothesley can just go to town punching them with his normal attacks. There is some concern as to whether or not his AoE will be very good. Obviously, if everyone's grouped up and frozen, then that's going to be a good chance to have good AoE. But if they're kind of spread out a little bit, then his AoE is probably not going to be very big. So in ungroupable AoE, I don't see this team being that strong. But in very groupable AoE, I do see this doing quite well. Now, it is possible that because Wriothesley, there's something about his kit. He has some good things and some bad things about his kit. The good thing is he raises and lowers his HP to be synergistic with the Wriothesley Hunter artifact set, which is a cracked out artifact set, one of the best artifact sets in the game, if you can take advantage of both its passive. So it's really good that Wriothesley does take away his HP to get the passive off. Now, there is some question as to whether or not he will take away too much HP and you won't be able to use the team properly without a healer. I'm not sure this is going to be the case. And if it's not the case, maybe you can use someone like Yelan here if he's really a little bit more self-sustaining. If he needs some healing and some interruption resistance, Xingqiu could be an amazing partner, especially with his AoE orbitals cryo application. But if he takes away too much HP, or if he's too hard to dodge with, or if you need it more comfy or need more healer, potentially Kokomi is the right choice. She can hold Thrilling Tales, Tenacity, both of which provide a very substantial buff. Tenacity is actually a large buff. Clam does non-negligible damage, and Thrilling Tales should be a really, really big buff for Wriothesley in this team because he's not running Bennett. There is some question as to whether she will take his HP too high and so that he loses one of his passives. So we'll have to wait and see how it's really going to play out. There's the option for building with less healing on Kokomi or Bennett if you're using him. There's also potentially the option as a free-to-play option of using Barbara, because you're actually really up close to the enemy. It's possible that Barbara will actually work as a Hydra applicator for a more free-to-play version. She can also hold the Thrilling Tales. I do personally expect Shenhe to be a substantial upgrade over Rosaria, and the reason why is because she's already an upgrade over Ayaka. But for Wriothesley doesn't need a ton of ER. He's not focused on his burst. So one of the biggest benefits to Rosaria is that she provides a lot of particles, where Wriothesley doesn't need a lot of particles. He needs that damage. And so Rosaria, part of the reason why she's close-ish to Shenhe when supporting Ayaka is the energy she provides. If she's not providing that energy, it won't be as good. So I'm thinking that Shenhe definitely will be the most premium, but I'm interested to see, will Barbara actually work really well? for the melt teams. So that's what I think about freeze. There's also the option of freeze with Layla. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to test this because I think the Layla's damage on this team is kind of important. Having her C6 is kind of relevant, and having her C4 is relevant for Hazo. If you don't have something like that, I feel like you're losing out on a lot of damage. I also feel like this team kind of struggles to find an identity with AoE versus single target. Like, it's sort of a single target team with Yelan and Wriothesley, but it's also an AoE team with Kazuha and Layla for freeze. So I don't see this team performing all that well. I would rather see Layla be more something like a Bennett. But again, there is that concern of, is Bennett going to be overhealing? And then there's the counter concern where, can you make it so that Bennett doesn't heal as much by building him with less HP so that your Wriothesley can do more damage? I really don't know. I'm just gonna have to wait and test it. On top of that, I do think he'll find a decent home in a Hyperbloom team. Although, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Hyperfridge. It's not really my favorite, which is Hyperbloom, but you use a Cryo unit. I actually think that Wriothesley can do it better than most, although he does have to be on field, so he's going to be taking away Nahida from being on field, but getting a damage buff from Yelan could be relevant. So I'm not sure. I'm going to test it. I'm sure this team will be good. Like, I cleared with, you know, just a 3-man Hyperbloom team, so I'm sure this team will be good, but I'm curious to see, you know, whether his damage is relevant enough just being buffed by Yelan. Like, Kuki and Nahida don't buff it at all, so I'm curious to see whether he'll bring enough to be a worth it spot. I mean, obviously it's gonna be worse than Alhaitham, but you know, I think it'll be decent. And if you have nothing else but you have this, then I think that that's a good option for him to be able to clear the abyss comfortably. And then we get to his best team. So this is going to be his best single target team, almost definitely. It's basically a reverse Melt team. If you think about, you know, Melt Ganyu, this is very, very similar. The difference is Melt Ganyu really needs interruption resistance. So you have to run something like Zhongli. But for Wriothesley, he already comes with built-in interruption resistance. And even if he doesn't have like infinite, you at least can dodge in between his normal attacks. So you can run a more offensive portion like Shenhe. And I'm really, really excited for this team. I think that this is going to be a really solid team for him. It's also a team where he's doing a lot of the personal damage. It's not just Zhang Ling's not carrying him. He really is carrying Zhang Ling because she's the one providing the pyro and he's the one melting. So he's actually the one doing the damage on this team, which is really nice. It's also a really great use for Shenhe. I love Shenhe seeing more use. She is my favorite design in the entire game. So I am really, really excited for this team. This team honestly makes me excited for the whole character, to be honest. And I'm excited for Freeze too. I just don't expect it to be anywhere. I don't expect it to be as good as Ayaka. But I will say this. If you don't like Ayaka, or if you haven't wished for Ayaka because you don't like her playstyle, a lot of people don't like her dash. They don't like her burst. They just don't like her haircut. They don't like her wet socks. For some reason, they're not a fan of Ayaka. This is a great opportunity to get a character that can stand in for Ayaka and work in Freeze, or can work in Hyperbloom if you don't have a good Freeze, work in Melt, and might even be able to scrounge together some other teams. So if you want to run some of these teams, if you want to run some Freeze, he could be a character that can unlock not new teams in your account, but yeah, that can unlock new team archetypes, so that you can play multiple team archetypes so you can have fun. I don't think he's going to be, you know, the very best character for all of these teams. Although I will say, almost guarantee you, I will enjoy running this more than running Ganyu Melt. I do play Ganyu Melt on the controller. Yes, I have played it on PC. I understand that it's better, but I don't like playing on PC. It's uncomfortable for me. It hurts my arms. So I like to play on controller. This team is extremely cringe on controller, so I am excited to play a Melt team, and it also uses Shenhe. This is really exciting for me. I am sure people who have wanted to build Freeze, but for whatever reason didn't want to build Ayaka, are really excited about this. And for people who have neither of that, but you do have a Hyperbloom team, you can at least throw him on here and see, you know, if he's your favorite character, you can at least see your favorite character on field while he's actually doing some damage and also driving the Hyperbloom team. Now, I would like to compare him a bit to a couple other characters because he is rather similar to Yoimiya. Versus Yoimiya, he has a lower potential damage ceiling if you're using Yoimiya without a shielder with this team like this, but that's not cause for alarm because Yoimiya is really underrated on shielderless teams. She can't always get away without a shielder, but when she can, like I fought the Magukenki, I've showed it on stream, she's really, really cracked out actually, and it's really, really a fun team. It's a very dynamic team, but this is not a Yoimiya salesman pitch. This is just saying that he has similar output to this team, but he has more comfort. He has more interruption resistance. He doesn't get punished the same way for dodging, and if you do compare him to Yoimiya with a shielder, like with Zhongli or something, then he will perform better, and he doesn't have to run a shielder. I haven't seen calcs of him versus Melt Ganyu. That's definitely something I'll be testing. I've played Melt Ganyu very extensively recently, so I'm looking forward to testing him versus that. I haven't seen Calxwim versus Ayaka, but you can bet I'll be testing him versus that. I'm really, really excited to compare those. I'm also interested to see how he stacks up versus Wanderer. Ever since I stopped using Wanderer with a shielder and I started using him with Bennett and just dodging and taking my L's when he got hit, I've liked Wanderer a lot better. He actually does a lot of damage if you can get away without a shielder. I do get knocked around. It is kind of frustrating. It doesn't feel that great, but when you can get your setups properly, when you can dodge properly, he does a lot of work. So Wriothesley, again, seems like he's not as good as Wanderer without a shielder, but works better than he does with a shielder. So it's kind of meets that middle, and it kind of puts a balance between comfort and damage. So I'm excited for him. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic. I've seen some people not like him. I've seen some people be really excited for him. I think he's going to be good, and I think people are going to be satisfied with how he plays. I think the only concern is how small his AoE might be and his synergy with healers and his passives. Make sure to subscribe so you can see my day one guide. I'll also be calling back to this and sharing what I learned and what I was right and wrong about. Make sure again to subscribe to The Genshin Scientist and to Zajef. If you want to support me and the channel, check out my Patreon. If you want to join a great community, check out the Discord. And if you don't want to do any of that, that's totally fine. Just watching the video has been more than enough. Thanks so much. Bye for now.